What socialism are you in favor for? Here we go. Get ready.
I believe that
Take a system.
A system?
Take a system in the world.
Caleb Hammer just broke this socialist girl on his podcast by asking her the most basic questions. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, your home for independent, nonpartisan commentary and analysis on politics, media, internet insanity, and more. Guys, we're going to do something fun and just react to a few more clips from Caleb Hammer, the financial audit podcast host who does this kind of Jerry Springer style show where he interviews people and has them on his podcast and goes over their finances, but also just exposes their drama and sometimes their crazy viewpoints. And he did that recently with a queer non-binary girl who, shocker, is a socialist. And I went over this on the Normal Gays podcast, my other channel, where we went over the part where she lied about her family, like supposedly disowning her and how she was a victim because she was queer. And then she admitted it. Well, actually, I cut them off because they're extremist bigots, and then wasn't able to explain in any way how they were actually extreme or bigots. We already went over that part, but there's another bit from this that is blowing up where she just feels so strongly about her amazing support for socialism. And then Caleb Hammer asks her like the most basic question and she totally glitches. We're going to watch.
They have barbed wire and awful living conditions and maggots in the food and abusing the people in there. No due process. That's a concentration camp.
Okay.
And so people are rightfully outraged and are out there to demoralize the people who are going into those.
I asked her what her job was, by the way.
This was really funny, and I did watch the full episode, as I always do, but she's describing ICE detention facilities where they are detaining immigrants, to deport them as concentration camps, which is ridiculous because obviously you're invoking the Holocaust, and that's where camps where people were sent to die and millions of people were killed. It's a very different situation, even if there are legitimate concerns or grievances about how some of these immigrants are treated. They're not dying in mass or being killed. They're being detained to be deported. It's just not the same thing. There've always been ICE detention facilities. They've ramped it up, but that is just a necessary part of the process of deporting people. And so it is just incredibly hyperbolic and inflammatory to call them concentration camps. And then she did just start rambling about this when he was like trying to just get her to explain her job and her situation. She seems to have TikTok brain, like an incurable case of TikTok brain, though she claims she doesn't even use TikTok at another point in the interview. But then he's like, well, what about Reddit? And she's like, so she's a Reddit brained person. Actually, I stand corrected. But let's keep going here because this gets hilarious.
I said finance, and you asked if I was a bad capitalist.
So
I'm a socialist.
Concentration camps. You're a socialist?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, socialism has never worked. What socialism are you in favor for? Here we go. Get ready.
I believe that
Take a system.
A system?
Take a system in the world that you're in favor of.
Well,
that you would rather be our system.
I just don't want it to be capitalism. Nor do I want it to be
take a system that has worked that you like and would like to replicate here.
Capitalism.
Take a system, please.
Oh my God.
That has been proven to work.
How is this a trick question? If somebody's like, oh, you support socialism. Okay, what kind of system in the real world could you point to that you're referring to that you support with socialism? That shouldn't be that difficult a question. Now, the reason it's a very difficult question is because when you talk about genuine, actual socialism, right, which implies collective control of the means of production through the state, then the only places that implement such a thing in the real world are either societies that pretty quickly failed and suffered extreme collapse because of it, or current day authoritarian nations. However, if you were to talk about what you might call social democracy or just a large welfare state, then you could start pointing to countries like Norway or Denmark or Sweden. But those are fundamentally primarily capitalist societies with free market economies that are then heavily taxed, and there's, a safety net, but they're not socialist in their fundamental nature. In fact, some of them rank higher for how capitalist and unregulated their economy is than the United States. And all of this is listen, I studied economics. I've reported on this stuff for years. I have very strong viewpoints on it, but you don't have to. It's complicated. I don't deny that. But then maybe don't die on a hill or have these super strong opinions about something and not be able to back them up with any real world examples or evidence at all. Is that too much to ask? Like, if you don't know anything about a certain topic, don't go on massive platforms and make grand pronouncements about it. That seems pretty intuitive to me. Maybe I'm just biased against her because of the Miss Blue Hair, but like, and the fact that she claims to be, of course, non-binary. But yeah, it seems to me like you should sit this one out if you're not familiar with basic facts. And she's acting like this is a trick question, but it's really not. If you were to ask me, like, okay, point to a couple of societies where you think their economic model functions well, that like the economic model that you believe in, I would say, well, more or less. I mean, you could look at countries like Switzerland. You could look at countries like the United States. You could look at places like Hong Kong. And yeah, more or less, the economic system I believe in has thrived in these places. That's not that difficult to question, but they really struggled with it. Anyway, let's keep watching her flounder.
Proven to work in any country, anywhere. That is better than our system, please.
Capitalism.
Yeah, please. Find,
oh my God.
Does not.
Okay, that's great. Yes, you have your talking points. That's wonderful. Now pick a system that has worked anywhere, better than
Eat her up.
that you would rather have.
Well,
I'm waiting for it.
Your definition of better is like not valuing the intrinsic value.
I don't give a fuck about my definition, your definition. I'm asking you to choose. Don't cater to my definition.
And I'm choosing socialism.
No, yeah, but pick it. Pick another country that has worked.
And unfortunately, we are an imperialist.
Never tried real socialism, I bet you.
Imperialism is hurting those socialist countries.
It hurt the USSR?
It's
Weren't
hurting
they imperialist?
Cuba and Venezuela. Yeah, the blockades that...
Bruh, Venezuela literally destroyed itself through democratic socialism. They elected, in a free and fair election, Hugo Chavez, who then enacted a mass socialist agenda and caused economic collapse that had people eating dogs and fleeing the country. And that's her example. Obviously, there are sanctions against Venezuela, sure hurt, but that's not the main cause of their woes. And then when he forces her to finally pick an answer, that's what she comes up with, is crazy. Yikes. All right, keep going here. But sorry for inflicting her upon you, by the way, because she's a tough listen. But I think it's also important, some of the things that were highlighted here, and just how little is beneath the surface for some of these folks when you just ask basic follow-up questions. Let's watch.
The blockades that we're doing for the
for
oil.
What it's worth, oil production dramatically fell after the state took control of Venezuela, and it hurt their economy dramatically well before our embargo. You might be right about Cuba, but no, Venezuela did it themselves before we embargoed. Timeline-wise, so you're just wrong. They had a slush fund coming in when it was collecting taxes from the private enterprise.
What I'm not wrong about is the fact that
right. So what system,
capitalism
please? Okay, I just asked what her job was. Here we go. Please, pick a system. One place that according to your values you would rather do.
New York.
That's not socialist. That's the most capitalist place in the world.
But Mamdani is out there doing
He's democratic socialist.
Yeah.
Socialist.
Yeah.
He still believes in capitalism. You know that, right?
Start somewhere.
No. That is still capitalist. All his policies are funded on the tax revenue generated by capitalism.
Well, so this is true, but also I actually think that Zoran Mamdani is a genuine Marxist at heart. He just is constrained by both political and kind of civic realities, that you can only do so much as mayor, and the population isn't actually on board with full Marxist takeover of everything. But yes, this is also true that even the way Zoran is currently governing New York City is not actually fully socialist. He's not trying to nationalize industries and take them over. I guess nationalize wouldn't be the right word because it's at the local level, but he's not trying to have, though he is doing some things, and frankly, some of his policies are already backfiring, like his, he potentially, multiple people died because he stopped doing homeless camp sweeps ahead of severe weather. But yeah, it's not great. That she has no idea how any of these things work, yet has the confidence. That's the thing that gets me, is how confident these people are making these pronouncements when they genuinely know nothing. Wait till we get to the second clip I pulled where she tries to define fascism. Oh my God. It's like, the American education system is not sending its best, or actually this is the best, because at least she could probably read the index card. But we're not at all totally cooked, chat. We're not at all utterly and totally cooked. Let's keep going.
By capitalism. That's capitalism. That is not
Taxes
a
are
workers-based socialism. Taxes come from the capitalist state still. So no, that is not socialist. But if that's what you'd like to see, then don't call yourself a socialist, because that's not socialist. That's still capitalism. That's more Scandinavian. That's European, which is still funded on capitalist systems. I was hoping you were going to say something like Sweden or the UK. I was hoping you were going to say something like that, which are still objectively capitalist countries. Not socialist by any means of the imagination. They have some more social programs, all funded by the success of capitalism, all funded by the marketplace and the wages created by capitalism.
Do more social programs? How many social programs do you have to do before it's socialist?
You're talking about social programs. Socialist is a completely different economic structure, though.
Right, where the worker has their relationship to the means of production.
State-run, but yes. State-run. That wouldn't really create much. You know what happened in the USSR? With all the land, most arable land almost in the world besides the United States and I think Ukraine. Well, they had to import all their wheat. Vast majority of their wheat. It doesn't work. It doesn't create the...
I'm sure she knows all about the Soviet Union, Caleb. Bro, I don't think she could even tell you a single fact about the Soviet Union. And I love how she's like saying, well, I just want the workers to have more of a relationship with the means of production. So you actually are saying actual socialism, government control, because that's the only way to have collective ownership over the means of production is through the state. And that has gone terribly, inevitably, and invariably whenever it is tried, because divorcing it from price signals and market mechanisms leads to rampant inefficiency and corruption. And this is not news. This is not like some shocking revelation. It is known, to quote Game of Thrones. I'll get it right this time. But I'll let her flounder here a little bit, then we'll get into her waxing poetic about fascism, which is a super word that she totally understands and is familiar with. That part I also found hilarious. Let's just wrap up this clip, though.
The outcome, people need to eat, and it doesn't work. You know what's actually more important?
Are we feeding people under capitalism?
Yes. Have you seen our poor people? They're
too much.
Yes. The poor people in the United States have to take Ozempic.
Okay, but is it because the cost of chips is more than minimum wage?
Chips? You think that's what's necessary for a sustained lifestyle?
I think that it's one of the cheapest things you can get from the gas station.
Gas station? Should we be doing our grocery shopping from the gas station? I think we've gotten some pretty bad advice if we're talking about meal prepping.
Well, you would know a thing or two about meal prepping.
Yes.
This girl, what is she saying? The reason people are fat is because a bag of chips is more than the minimum weight. What? I'm sorry. It is simply not the case that the reason people are fat in America is because they can only afford unhealthy food. That is not true. In fact, many of the decisions that they make are probably more expensive than it would be to actually just buy, chicken breast and broccoli and rice, right? So that is totally inaccurate. That is ridiculous levels of cope. And you can tell she's just floundering. And you almost have to feel bad for her a little bit. I really don't at all. But she just got abjectly humiliated by just the most basic scrutiny and follow-up questions from Caleb, who is, a smart guy and has read about this stuff, but isn't even some subject matter expert. He just has basic familiarity with facts and with the concepts that she keeps dropping as buzzwords, and then she has none at all. It's actually wild. Not as wild, though, as when she tries to define fascism, and it goes very, very poorly. Let's watch that second clip here.
Fascism is what...
Define fascism. What is the economic and political structure of fascism?
Fascism is private profit, or private prisons.
Oh my God.
It actually probably wouldn't be. I'll be honest. Under the economic structure of fascism, it's much closer to socialism than it is capitalism.
Sorry, I already got to pause this. Fascism is private profit or private prisons? That's like not even close to the topic. I don't even know if a lot of fascist governments even had private prisons. A lot of them probably had state prisons. And regardless, it has nothing really to do with fascism. Fascism is like the far right version of authoritarianism, when you have centralized power in an executive that viciously crushes dissent, subordinates individual rights to like the idea of the nation or the collective, and then tends to be extremely militaristic and repressive. Whether or not the prisons are private or publicly owned doesn't really come into play there. But I don't know. She's heard the word fascism said on TikTok a lot, so I'm sure she considers herself something of a expert on the matter. Oh boy.
In every measured way. Now, there are private enterprises, but the people running them and the people working for them are placed there by the state. You have to be loyalist to the state. And the state is determining usually the economic trend of what is being worked on in the economy. It is much closer to a socialist economic structure and political structure than capitalism by far. Free market doesn't exist in socialism. There is no, in fascism, there is no free market. It's not about private prison. No, it would be likely a public prison, and the person
who's in the prison
is going to be, who's in the prison? Whatever they decide the laws are under that country. It was different under Nazi Germany as it was under Spain.
Oh my God, I'll just pause for a second. The face she makes and the slide little comment she makes where she thinks she's like doing her big one and turning it back on Caleb, maddening. I would crash out if somebody thought they were like making a good point and it's just the dumbest you've ever heard in your life as a rebuttal that's not even on topic. Oh my God, hair pull. I already cut all my hair off and got this short haircut, but if I still had my long hair, I'd pull it out of my head listening to her yap in person. Caleb has the patience of a saint with some of these folks. And I consider myself to be patient when I do interviews and stuff, but I would crash out after a certain point. Also, he goes for so long with these people. He films for like 2 hours. I could not. God bless Caleb Hammer for the patience of a saint.
It was under Spain as it was under Italy. That's not what defines fascism. You know nothing. You use buzzwords and you know no actual reality.
I know that reality is that we are suffering and there's got to be an alternative.
Relatable crash
you got
out.
The TikTok word again. That means nothing. Suffering has gone down substantially under capitalism. It is by every numeric fact in the world, including the capitalism of Europe. A very capitalist economy whose social programs are funded by capitalism. Norway, sovereign wealth fund, one of the best in the world, through oil extraction, selling on the private marketplace. Capitalism. You know nothing.
Capitalism allows people to die.
Yeah,
So
no
it's
one
not
ever
profitable.
died under
It's
communism.
not profitable to.
Did anyone ever die under
support-
communism?
Under capitalism.
Great.
Oh my God,
Good
she won't
response.
answer any direct question. Good grief.
Oh, go ahead. Get your point.
Under capitalism, people are not prioritized as much as profits are.
Stop. There's even more to the clip, but I can't listen to another second of her. What do you mean? Capitalism allows people to die. Yeah, because no one ever died but before capitalism. And no one ever dies in non-capitalistic countries. And again, what Caleb pointed this out, but you can look at like human progress data on this. Capitalism created such innovation and wealth and huge increases in the average standard of living that people's lifespans increased enormously. Child mortality rates decreased enormously because of the wealth and affluence that capitalism created. And so, yeah, that's why we have some form of social safety nets, because in a purely capitalistic, though even then, there are alternatives that could exist in a free market system. But sure, no one is saying that like the market will take care of everything and be perfect at all times. But to suggest that it's like just capitalism equals death, I don't know, man. At some point, some of these people are beyond hope. And watching them makes me lose faith because their vote counts the same as mine or yours. And frankly, she's probably like one of the better informed Gen Z socialist girls. And it's not just her, right? Because you could say this is just one anecdotal example of one stupid person, but it is and it isn't. Because you look at broader data and young people overwhelmingly say they support socialism, but then when you give them a follow-up in polling, and then when you give them a follow-up multiple choice question asking them to define socialism, define it incorrectly. And that is very, very bleak, because they will decide the future trajectory of our economy and our country politically in overwhelming amounts. and yet they lack basic familiarity with and literacy with the concepts and basic facts about how these things work. And it's not that they have a different opinion than me, right? There's actual socialists and Marxists who know their understand all these things and they could make a case. And I would totally disagree with them, but I wouldn't like think they're necessarily dumb or totally ignorant. I would just think they have some very wrong ideas. Then there's this, though, where these people are just so ill-informed and so internet brain broken. And I think Caleb Hammer is doing, in one sense, a public service by highlighting these people and holding them to account and scrutinizing their ideas and lack of substance. But in the other sense, he's also reminding us how incredibly cooked we might just be. That's my take. You guys will have to let me know what you thought of this clip and of this episode. Go watch the full thing over on the Caleb Hammer's channel. Of course, if you haven't yet, it's a maddening but also endlessly entertaining episode of Financial Audit, guys. And with that, we'll leave it there for this video. Make sure to subscribe to this channel as well as Caleb Hammer. Do hit the like button, and we'll be back with more real soon.